Welcome and thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here with us tonight. We anticipate some more folks coming in. We exceeded expectations. We have over 150, I suspect, that have signed up. So thank you for being here with us this evening. It means quite a lot. I'd like to, before I do a formal introduction, I'd like to say something about the way in which we'd like to proceed. Dr. Brown will speak for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we will take a 5-minute refreshment break. In the back there, you'll see some cookies, some nice fruits, and some drinks. Avail yourself of those, come back, and we will open the floor up for Q&A. Does that sound good? Okay. As for my formal scholarly remarks, good evening, everyone. My name is Amin Asfari. I'm the Law Foundation of Saskatchewan Chair in Police Studies at the Justice Studies Department. It is an honor to introduce tonight's distinguished speaker for the Law Foundation of Saskatchewan Endowed Lecture, Dr. Robert A. Brown. Dr. Brown is a leading voice in the field of criminal justice with decades of experience at the intersection of race, policing, and public safety. As professor and chair of the Department of Social Sciences at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, his work bridges the worlds of academic inquiry and policy implementation, offering critical insights into some of the most pressing issues facing law enforcement today. With a PhD in criminal justice from the University of Cincinnati, Dr. Brown has engaged in policy and advisory work at the highest levels, including serving on the board of public safety in Indianapolis, advising multiple police departments, and contributing to the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation's Use of Force Center. His research, published in top criminology journals, interrogates the complexities of police-citizen interactions, alternatives to incarceration, and the inescapable role of race in shaping justice outcomes. Tonight's topic, Race in the Line of Duty, Unpacking Its Impact on Policing, Attitudes, Behaviors, and the Criminal Legal System, is as urgent as it is far-reaching. In today's increasingly polarized socio-political climate, discussions about policing are no longer confined to the realm of policy or academia. They are at the center of national and international debates about democracy, governance, and human rights. And criminology and criminal justice programs in the academy are not immune from these tensions. It is important to understand that policing specifically, and the criminal justice system more broadly, has historically been used as a political tool. From its dark origins in the United States as slave patrols designed to capture and return enslaved people, to the exclusion of Catholics through prohibition, as Joseph Gusfield reminds us in The Symbolic Crusade, to the wars on drugs and terror that disproportionately targeted and continue to target racialized and marginalized communities. The justice system has long been shaped by those in power to serve particular political ends. Today in the US, the criminal justice system is undergoing significant challenges that will reverberate elsewhere in the world, including here in Canada. It is being gutted, and only loyalists will remain, owned by Trump, Musk, and their billionaire allies. What we are witnessing is a reshaping of institutions, not toward justice and accountability, but toward allegiance and control. As we gather here today, we must confront a sobering reality. The recent rise of authoritarian regimes, both in my home country, the US, and the potential for such shifts in my host country, Canada, has profound implications for law enforcement and its role in society. In the US, we have seen how law enforcement can be co-opted as an instrument of state power. From aggressive policing of protests to the increasing use of ICE detentions, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, detentions and deportations, while some local law enforcement agencies have taken a stand, refusing to participate in federal immigration crackdowns, we must ask, how long can they sustain such positions in the face of overwhelming political pressures? Here in Canada, we do not yet see the official rise of authoritarianism, but the antecedent conditions exist. The growing appeal of protectionist, nationalist, and exclusionary politics creates a climate in which law enforcement could, in time, be pressured to align itself with broader political agendas rather than remain a neutral enforcer of law and justice. We must recognize that authoritarianism, protectionism, and tribalism have the power to undo decades of progress in building police community trust. The relationships that have been carefully cultivated between law enforcement and marginalized or underrepresented groups can be eroded in an instant when the police are weaponized as instruments of exclusion rather than as guardians of public safety. The legitimacy of law enforcement is not just about policies on paper. It's about lived experience, about the interactions that shape people's sense of justice, fairness, and security. Dr. Brown's scholarship and career are invaluable in helping us to understand these dynamics, not just diagnosing the challenges, but offering pathways forward. His work compels us to ask difficult questions about the role of law enforcement in democratic societies, about whether policing can be a force for justice or merely an extension of political will, and about what we must do academically, politically, and practically to ensure that the line of duty does not become a line of oppression. At a time when discussions of policing are too often reduced to political binaries, Dr. Brown brings the nuance, depth, and critical insight needed to move these conversations forward. It is therefore my great privilege to introduce him tonight. But before I do, I want to say that I'm deeply grateful to the Law Foundation of Saskatchewan for their generous support in making this endowed lecture series possible, and for their commitment to fostering dialogue on law and justice. I also acknowledge my predecessor, the late Dr. Rick Riddell, whose dedication shaped this series for many years. Special thanks to the Dean of Arts' office, particularly Dean Dr. Shannon Day and Associate Dean Dr. Tom McIntosh, as well as Michelle Lemuel and my student Guy Roytov, for their invaluable contributions to this event. Lastly, I want to recognize the Department of Justice Studies, an outstanding department whose faculty, scholarship, and impact on criminal justice policy and education continue to set the standard for excellence. This lecture series is not just an academic exercise, it is an essential part of our community's intellectual and civic life. The conversations it fosters have a profound impact on our understanding of justice, governance, and social equity. I am grateful to each of you for being here tonight and for engaging with these pressing issues and for contributing to the ongoing dialogue that shapes our shared future. And with that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Robert A. Brown.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you. Dr. Asfari, thank you for the kind words, and thank you for thinking of me for this lecture. I sincerely want to thank all of the students who are here. I'm going to give you a forward. You're going to see a lot of slides. I have no problem with you taking pictures versus trying to be a scribe and taking copious notes. You do not have to worry. I am not the presenter who is going to read word for word lengthy slides to you. You're going to see a lot of images that will serve as talking points, and I hope they're helpful to you. And anything that I share in word or through slides, if you want to reach out to me afterwards, I will gladly share them with you. I also extend that to community members and my academic colleagues. I thank you all for being here. For university administrators, any public officials here, any practitioners, thank you for allowing me to be in your space. I truly do everything I can to make sure that the dialogue and the learning is circular, not just linear. Some of you may come to this thinking that it's just about hearing the words from Dr. Brown, an expert. I know a thing or three, but it's more important that we talk together. And it's really more important that you talk together, because when I'm gone, when someone like me is gone, you have each other. So I hope that what we talk about tonight, it will not just be a conversation where people are shooting questions at me. I'm ready for that, and I will do the best I can to give you answers. I do not use the expression "to be honest with you," because I am hopefully honest in all of my words and deeds. I typically use the expression "to be candid," if I even use that expression at all, because I tend to be a direct person. Life is too short, and the issues that I tend to deal with are too serious to take them lightly. Being candid is not a license to be mean or mean-spirited. Being pointed is not a license to punch downward. But we will have probably some questions, and you will hear some comments that are very pointed. I need something from you. Let's see if this is working. Do you know where the... There we go. I need something from you all. A little bit of participation. So I thought about doing the classic, you read the first bullet point of my family, that my mother and my wife are awesome. And that's the end of the presentation. That's all you need to know. That Jeanette Adgerson Brown is an awesome mother, and that Isabel Renee Antonia Castañeda Brown is an awesome wife. I would not be here as Dr. Brown without them. And I think it's important to acknowledge them. I'm going to probably give some names for a few other people, because I think it's important to give voice to the people who are influential in your life, the people who are influential in situations. So know that first and foremost, I'm a family man. Dr. Brown is what I do. It's not all of who I am. And it means a lot to me to let you know that I'm the son of Jeanette. I am the spouse, the husband of Isabel, or Risa, as her nickname is. I also need you to know a little bit about the rest of my family. I'm going to start with the dogs. There's Maximus, Obsidian. Everybody has two names in the household. There's Rico Blue. Maximus Obsidian is a black lab without a tail. Rico Blue is a pit bull, with a white and black pit bull with one blue eye. And Titan Maximus is a pit bull mastiff mix. And he's the anchor dog for the house. I'm supposedly the pack leader, but I think Titan runs the house. The kids, Team Brown. Alexander Tiberius, 14 years old. He's my 8th grader who will soon be a high schooler, and I'm dealing with that. Primarily through Alex, I'm a dad. I'm a super dad. And super dad in the sense of I'm doing all kinds of things. Through Alex, I'm an assistant lacrosse coach. I'm an assistant football coach. I'm an assistant basketball coach. Through my daughter, next daughter, Isabella Rosalie. She's a volleyball player, gymnast. Both kids are former Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners. They even got me into doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And if there's anybody in the room who does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm an old, slow white belt who might be able to do something if I get on top of you and just rest. That's it. That's all I've got. My next child, Christian Daniel. He's Alex is also a band kid. He plays alto saxophone. Christian Daniel, he's a singer, alto singer. My oldest daughter, and this is the favor that I need. Can you all help me in wishing my daughter a happy birthday today, which I'm missing? Can we do that? I just want a video really quickly. And if we can all say On three, happy birthday, Emily. Can you do that with me? Here we go, old man with technology. On three, 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Emily. I love you, girl. Emily just turned 30 today. And even though she's 30 and supposedly out of the house and on her own, I'm still dealing with taking care of my baby girl, Emily. Why did I share this? I can tell you that I do this at home. I do this when I speak to communities. I do this when I speak to law enforcement agencies. The better we understand each other as people, we're closer to changing conditions. You see, it's really easy to be detached in criminal justice. It's really easy for criminal justice issues to just be data points. When you can see criminal justice in action, when you understand, when you can put a human face and an identity, especially things that you can relate to, like who do you love? Who's your family? Then when we start thinking about criminal justice, we have to think a little differently. We're challenged internally to think, what if it were me? What if it were one of mine? What if it were my family member or a close friend who is about to be arrested, who's experiencing the use of force, who's incarcerated and removed from the community for a lengthy period of time? One day without my loved ones would be a long day. A week, a month, years, it becomes more real. And I find that when criminal justice professionals and when community members who call for justice to move people and get rid of people start to see that human face, we have more thoughtful discussions and hopefully more thoughtful actions, more thoughtful policy behind that. So it's important for you to understand a little bit about me as your speaker so that you understand why I'm going to say certain things and the meaning behind some of those things. So I have not done this often, but I want to share a few other things about my family. Because sometimes people think that I'm going to say things about race, and I have a bias that because I'm a big, dark black man, I just think what I think because I do not have important lived experiences or a background or a certain education that informs my thoughts. Because it's easy to just judge the rapper of anyone and think that's why they believe what they believe. And it's hard sometimes to accept that some people put critical thought behind what they believe and why they believe it. I come to you, the son of several family members who were in the military. My grandfather served in the Navy in World War II. My father and uncle served in Vietnam, both in the Army. My mother's twin brother, she has a fraternal twin, he's no longer with us. He served in the Air Force, and his last job, he was a U.S. Capitol Police officer. I have a close cousin who was a part of my life growing up, who was a Washington, D.C. Metro Police officer. So I come before you as someone who has family members who are veterans. I come to you as someone who has law enforcement members and who has had law enforcement members in the family. I also come to you as the child of a formerly incarcerated parent. I started going into prisons at a very young age to visit my father. He was one of the original habitual offenders, and shortly after I graduated from college, he received his life sentence because he murdered someone. And Washington, D.C. is not a state, so he was a federal prisoner. And after he received his life sentence, he was moved around in the federal system. And unfortunately, he died in 2019 in a federal medical correctional facility about 20 minutes down the road from me. I know what it's like to go into prisons as a visitor. I know what it's like to have to go into prisons and be searched. I know what it's like for my fiance at the time and then wife to have to go into prison to meet my father. I struggled with the issues of would his grandchildren ever meet him? Did I want to have them have that experience of having to go into a prison? I've also gone into prison as a legal consultant, where I did not get searched. My briefcase was just scanned through, and they just looked at me and said, "Go right on in, Mr. Brown," or then later in my career, Dr. Brown, Dr. Brown. So I know what it's like to go into prisons, both as a regular person visiting someone and as a legal professional and as a scholar. And it's not easy. My understanding and perspective about the criminal justice system is layered. We are going to talk tonight about race and policing and race and criminal justice, but I want you to understand my perspective about this justice system comes from my human lived experience. It's not just simply about race. I have addiction in my family. I have some people in my family who, my mother was also in the Army and a reservist, and she worked really hard to make sure that her baby boy could go on to escape certain things from that were going on in the city where we lived. So among the reasons why I made sure to praise her name, I grew up in a single-parent household where people struggled and worked together to try to provide an opportunity for someone to have the best life they could. I have a sister, 5 years older, who suffers from addiction issues. So I understand drugs and responding to people who are using drugs. I understand it in a way that some people don't, or rather, maybe some people do. It's informed some of the work that I've done in veterans treatment courts and drug courts. Professionally, or education and then professionally. I'm a graduate of Hampton University, a historically black college in Hampton, Virginia, southeastern Virginia, and that's important. I don't think it came out in the presentation, the initial announcement. The University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, is one of 4 historically black colleges and university in Maryland. I have purposely chosen to dedicate my professional life to working and teaching at historically black colleges and universities. I was made through one, and I made sure to return to one once I became Dr. Brown and could be the person leading the show. My bachelor's degree is in political science. I wanted to be a lawyer, or at least that's what I told people. And I never really wanted to be a lawyer, but telling people I wanted to be a lawyer kept them off my back. So anyone in here, particularly you young people who are trying to defer responsibilities, tell people you want to go to law school, you have to get the bachelor's degree first. I ended up going to Indiana State University, and I earned a master's in criminology with a specialization in corrections. I wanted to take my career. The whole family, father situation definitely influenced where I wanted to go. So I specialized in corrections, and my first job with my degree was working at the National Center on Alternatives to Incarceration. And I did parole planning for prisoners, juveniles who were waived to the adult system. I worked to get them waived back. Sentencing mitigation at the state and federal level, and I loved it. And I decided through doing that work, I wanted to become Dr. Brown. I wanted the title. I wanted the things that I believed it would come with the empowering things that would come with having a PhD. And I went off to the University of Cincinnati, and if you were to read my personal statement of why I wanted to go there, it read that I wanted to be the next big person in corrections. I was concerned about the modern day slavery system known as prisons. I was all in. And at the University of Cincinnati, in my first semester there, in order to get money for the engagement ring for my girlfriend and subsequent wife, I did a ride-along. They had a project, a year-long study, the only year-long study in existence, funded by the National Institute of Justice. They had a project doing systematic social observations of police officers. I was one of the data collectors on that project. I sat in a room like this. I learned how to record systematically the behaviors of officers and the behaviors of the public. I happened to be the only black male among the black American male, among the data collectors. And for the sake of understanding, I am the first black male in the University of Cincinnati's PhD program, a highly ranked program. And in Over 30 years, there have only been 3 black males to graduate from Cincinnati. The third one is my protege, someone that I mentored onto the program, who I worked with at Fayetteville State University, an historically black college and university in North Carolina. So what we do, how we put time in, how we invest in people can matter. And he also happens to be a focused policing scholar like me now. I did that ride along, and I grew up hating the cops. I was a child of the 80s when F the Police, I'm going to be good today. When F the Police came out, I had the tape. I was listening to it live. That's what my heart felt like. I did not like the police at all. Might even say I hated the police. And here I am doing a ride along, sitting in a car for an 8-hour shift with a cop. And that ride along changed my life. I saw things that I never expected. I confirmed that I could never be a police officer because I could not handle the way the public treats police officers sometimes. I even saw a person spit on an officer, and watching that officer not react violently shocked me. I saw officers deal with so much blatant disrespect, not subjective disrespect, but blatant disrespect. I saw officers deal with words. I saw officers deal with some very tragic human conditions, some people who were not doing good things to each other or children. And I realized policing was more important to me than studying corrections. There were a lot of people out there studying corrections and working with kids, but there were not a lot of people like me formally studying the police. When I got into the policing literature, I realized this issue of race and policing the poor and policing neighborhoods that are considered socially disadvantaged, policing scholars have been writing about this for a long time. And it was stuff that I had never read, I never knew about. So I decided to dedicate my intellectual energy, my academic focus to policing. And that is why I stand before you today as a policing scholar and an expert on race. Community engagement, I told you earlier, I'm a dad. I'm the person out there shuttling around my kids and other kids. I'm Coach Brown, I'm Mr. Brown. I'm buying snacks, I'm feeding the village, and I've made a long career out of making sure that the village is not just a term or expression. Since I've graduated, talk about old. Since 1991, I've been active in mentoring programs specifically targeting young black males, some programs focusing on system-involved delinquents or juveniles who are being processed, to young men who are considered to be at risk because of their backgrounds and their living conditions. I have done that work through court-based programs. I've done that kind of work through police-based programs, because if we are going to be serious about race and policing, we have to be serious about the village. In addition to sharing this with you as far as my background, I challenge all of you with judgment. Make sure that you are doing something in your village. Because if you are here today and you are concerned, if you're here today and you're just entering the topic, the village is more important than the system. The village is more important than the system, because the system is supposed to work for the village. You get me? All right. Let's pretend that we're going to have a lecture. So, I think I can end it right here and just by telling you race matters in criminal justice. Anyone who does not, this is a non-starter. This really has to be a non-starter. How race matters, why race matters, those are some things for us to definitely wrestle with. But we should not be wrestling with this fact. Race has always mattered in criminal justice. Race continues to matter in criminal justice. I dream that one day it will not, but I don't think in my lifetime that dream is going to be fulfilled. But anyone who does not pay attention to the stories of our people, the stories of human civilization, the timeline of what's happened across nations, the data points that we have today. If you do not get behind this simple fact, you've got a problem. We also need to recognize that media matters. And media matters more and more each day, because the proliferation of media, and when I talk about media, I am talking about news media, information media, I am talking about entertainment media, popular culture. It's hard for me as an academic, as a professor, but there's a reality that more people learn or think they learn accurately about crime and justice through movies, television, and music than they ever do sitting down and opening a criminal justice book. And even criminal justice majors think they know more about crime and justice because they can solve the case within 10 minutes on a television show. We have to recognize this. We have to accept it. As community members, as academics, as teachers, as criminal justice professionals, we have to do something about how media is shaping people's perceptions about crime and justice, and for sure, race and justice. And acknowledging it is the first step of dealing with a problem. We have to acknowledge that media is important, media matters. We're going to talk about this a little more when we talk about implicit bias tonight. So, I want to go over a few things. This might, for those of you who are criminal justice majors or you've taken criminal justice classes, this might make you feel like you're in a lecture, but I truly want to treat these as bullet points to talk about. This is a great time to take out your phone if you're expecting to take notes, and I can give this information to you later. So first of all, we need to recognize that the police are a part of formal social control. They are the infamous or else. Whether a police officer comes up into a situation and they're nice and smiling and friendly, officer friendly, that character is always backed up with the or else power. Hey, would you please move along? Or else. Even when they do not say or else, the or else power is real. And they're 24 hours, 7 days a week. Policing has evolved to a point, we're not going to go down a long history lesson of early colonial policing, but policing today, it has evolved into a 24-hour service where people can push the button. Anybody who has a phone, and with the proliferation of cell phones, anybody who has a phone can push the button and say, something's happening right now. This is a famous quote of a scholar, Egon Bittner, and an interpretation of Egon Bittner's work. He's like, if Shakespeare were to write about policing, that would be Egon Bittner. It's painful, but powerful, his work. Important is his work. Clockers quoted Bittner as saying, the reason why we have the police, something is happening that ought not to be happening right now, and someone wants something to be done about it now. We do not have the police to enforce the law. We have the police because something's happening. It might be someone's breaking the law, but it could just be also, I'm concerned about someone over there and I want you to make them go away. Or someone needs help, because one of the things about policing is complex. We have created a government entity that we expect to respond to the something, sometimes going in not knowing what the something is, oftentimes going in being told the something is one thing, and then when they get there, the something is something else. But we have this entity, we have these individuals who are on call 24/7, and they have accepted the mandate to respond to the call. And that's important. We have to recognize that they have discretion. They wield a lot of power. They have the ability to just ask people questions. They have the ability to encourage people to move along. They have the legal authority to lay hands on individuals. They have the legal authority to use pain compliance to make people do what they believe what they want them to do or what they need them to do. And they have the ability to use lethal force if the situation requires it, based on their judgment. So we need to understand these basic things about the police. And this one, the police are a reflection of our society. The police are that entity of government that's responding to how government wants things to work and how certain segments of the public want things to work. I'm going to use the term racism briefly, or loosely, forgive me. The racism that we may see in society and in communities, sometimes the police are just reflecting what's going on in society. They are following the call that was made to them of someone does not belong here. Someone is suspicious. Someone's drug use outside is a problem, but another person's drug use that we know about that's inside their house, well, that's not a problem. The police sometimes are just that mechanism for dealing with how society is feeling about a particular issue, situation, something going on at a particular time. Again, please don't try to recreate the wheel in this drawing. Take a picture, hit me up later. I cannot, and policing scholars and practitioners cannot understate the significance of discretion and the power that officers wield. We also have to recognize discretion throughout the criminal justice system. The truth of the matter is, only a small percentage of people get arrested when they could, get actually arrested, but they're not arrested. The police do not arrest nearly as many people as they could based on statute. And courts do not charge nearly as many people as they could charge. And and we can get it. We could go at another time deeper into the reasons of why it doesn't happen in courts. Prosecutors making decisions on whether they could win a case, and prosecutors being very concerned about their conviction rate, and judges also being concerned about conviction rates. Hey, if you get here and we charge you, we damn sure want to make sure you get convicted, because if you don't get convicted, that's a loss, and we don't look good and we don't feel good about it. Our correctional system, there are discretionary decisions that can be made. Correctional officers exercise discretion as they're dealing with prisoners. In areas where they do utilize parole boards, it's a discretionary choice as to whether or not to allow someone to be released early from their sentence. So discretion is something that is important to understand throughout the system. When it comes to policing, hey, why did you stop me instead of this person? Why are you dropping the hammer on me? I was only going 5 miles over the limit. Can't you give me the break in a traffic stop? Why are you coming to my house? Why did you believe that I'm causing a ruckus? When you got here, you didn't hear a loud noise. So why are you probing so hard what's going on in my house? Why are you asking me if you can search me or my vehicle? Why are you arresting me and not believing my version of what happened between this other person? Why are you not believing me? And that's where we start talking about discretion. An important thing to understanding race and criminal justice, I would say policing in general, and this, particularly you students, this is one of the most important slides that I have here. Our biggest problem is we think that what the police do is just all they police. We do not pay enough attention to parse out the outcome matters. When it comes to race, and we're going to talk about this in a bit, what influences officers' decision to arrest someone is not necessarily the same set of factors that influence an officer's decision to issue someone a ticket, or an officer's decision to use force, lethal or non-lethal. Or, and something that we do not talk a lot about, it is so easy to think about policing as simply being about enforcement activities. Because we deal with this thing of, is it law enforcement or should we use the term policing? Law enforcement is strictly this right here. Law enforcement, we're talking about those activities. Policing involves providing services to people. Sometimes it's roadside assistance. Sometimes it's giving someone a ride. Sometimes it's a wellness check, and not a wellness check because something criminal is perceived. Sometimes we rely on these individuals to do good things and help people. not just hurt people and not just enforce the law and take some sort of coercive action. But it's so easy for us to think about policing as being about whether they kill someone, whether they shoot someone, kill someone, or arrest people, because we focus so much on those outcomes. And that makes it really difficult, because when we start talking about race, the disparities that we see when it comes to arrest, and yes, non-whites do get arrested. The data is clear and consistent. Non-whites, for various reasons, get arrested more than whites. Minority group members get arrested and experience formal authority more than majority group members. But that's not the whole of policing. And as we talk about some strategies that people have used over time, such as increasing the number of non-white officers, increasing the number of black officers, minority officers, thinking that that's democratic policing, that's bringing about representation, and thinking that black people don't discriminate or wouldn't discriminate against other black people. Minorities would not discriminate against other minorities because they know what it's like to be discriminated against as a minority. So let's go with the solution: hire more non-white officers. But what do you do when the research finds that non-white officers, black officers, behave just the same way when it comes to coercive actions as white officers? And in some situations, they are even more likely to make arrests and use force against minority citizens and in neighborhoods that are, in communities that are predominantly non-white. Well, that didn't work out so well. And because we are sometimes lazy in our thought and our theoretical approaches, skin color diversity or simple representative bureaucracy, that's going to solve certain problems, we find out that, oh wait, we brought on a bunch of officers and we deployed them in a certain way, and they're continuing the problem, if not making it worse. I feel I can go over this quickly because we know that race has been a factor, particularly when it comes to disparities in the criminal justice system. At least in the American context, our history of policing and race can easily be tracked to the era of the slave patrols. Most of you, if you've studied policing, criminal justice, you were taught that we borrowed our model of policing from London, England, Sir Robert Peel, and that's why in big cities like New York and Boston and Philadelphia and Chicago, we saw the police model, we saw the development of the police, the system of policing looking very similar to what we saw in London, England. Very urban, industrial, policing urban, industrial areas. But what do you do when you have to come up with a police force that has to deal with rural agricultural areas, such as the southern part of the United States? Well, a very unique form of policing, the slave patrols were developed, and both the London model and the slave patrol model, as American society developed moving westward, both of those models influenced policing. We had a country that went to war over slavery and over issues of blacks who could be freed. Even in northern states that abolished slavery, there were processes where freed blacks could still be apprehended. And when we start talking about racial profiling, I want to give you all a little secret. I'm black. I can try to hide it, but for some reason people seem to look at me and they think I'm black. I can't change this. And anyone who would cue in on, naturally tanned people, particularly dark naturally tanned people, I think that they're up to no good. I'm going to question, if we go back in time, whether they are legally free. And when we deal today, unfortunately, there's some people who think that people who look like me, outside this outfit, that people like me, some people think, are somehow inherently criminal. So if you are dealing with a person who believes that skin color is a sign of deviance, it's real easy to decide to stop me as opposed to some other people, because I can't change this. No amount of makeup is going to last. You see how I sweat. Laugh. This is being recorded. Laugh. I can't change this dark skin. So if there are individuals who look at dark skin and they think negative things, I'm already halfway down the hill, down the slide. So you're going to see a couple images here. When George Floyd happened, and George Floyd being the latest or a very high profile situation that people were very upset about, and it turned into a lot of protest, a lot of unrest. George Floyd was not new. What happened to George Floyd, it's new in the sense that it was captured on video. It's new that it happened. Remember that media matters. It happened in a way that people who are not from Minneapolis could see it, feel it. It was visceral. Heard his voice, heard his cries, and it touched people, and people had reactions to it. But it's not new. Particularly in some communities, it just happened to be seen, recorded. We have to understand when we go back to that race matters. All the how it matters, we need to figure some things out. But we have been dealing with this for years. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm a criminal justice person. I don't always add right. 50 years between these two images, right? Why is it that we're still seeing things like this happen? This is Eric Garner. Someone selling loose cigarettes. Sure, it was criminal, a criminal act. But multiple police officers decided to respond because someone called and said, hey, we can't have people selling loosies. That's messing with my business. I need people to come in here and buy a full pack of cigarettes. Forget this underground economy. And the way the police approached this person, we don't need to get into whether a chokehold was legal or not. I want you to understand they're still doing this. These images are real. There's no fabrication in these images. And we're still dealing with this. I could do a little quiz game. Which image is from the 1960s and early 70s, and which one is from, say, 2014? And I can tell you, it's not simply limited to whether it's a black and white photo or a color photo. We are still dealing with this problem, this thing. We still have individuals and communities that feel oppressed. We have seen reactions. Our media has entertained stories and put out stories focusing on, well, okay, yeah, something bad happened, but when you start looting, I don't respect the movement. I don't respect the issue anymore because some people decided to really get upset and burn something down. When we focus more on that instead of this is part of the reason why we have race relation problems when it comes to policing. And this is why we should focus on the police, but we also should be having community-based conversations regarding why do some people have this problem? And when we have social unrest due to some action by the criminal justice system, typically police officers, what do we do with this one? Out of all the images I've just showed you, this one hits me the hardest. Anybody from the back having trouble reading it? We live in a world where trained cops can panic and act on impulse, but untrained citizens must remain calm with a gun in their face. Truest words ever written on a poster board. We mitigate police officer behavior, particularly when something goes wrong, and we focus on, well, the citizen, the person was non-compliant with commands. When we can pull up multiple videos in situations where the officer is giving contradicting commands, telling someone to stay still, yet move over here at the same time. Put your hands up, show me your ID, which one do you want me to do? And then when a person reaches to get their ID, as they were told, they're going for a weapon, they're going for a gun, and the officer ends up using lethal force. And we consider those to be one-offs. We don't like to talk about those. We do not like to focus on those. And we do not like to deal with the reality that, when I was at school, there was DARE, don't do drugs, and there was officer friendly, hey, here's a police officer coming in to give you good news, and you can go to help for a police officer. But I don't remember in high school or college as a criminal justice major, the course that taught me on how to interact with the police and be compliant. So we have a public that's expected to just be compliant with all commands, and we have a police force that's not always held to the same standards. How does this matter? For those of you in the back, and it's faint in blue, when I grow up, I wanted to be a cop until I seen them kill Eric Garner. Why should someone who has never had a positive direct experience with a police officer and someone who's vicarious experience and through what the media shows them, the information that they take in, why should someone who's gone through something like that ever aspire to be a police officer? Some might aspire to be a police officer. I want to change it. I want to make sure something different happens. But how can we not understand someone saying, no, I do not want to be a part of this based on what I'm seeing? We have to recognize that bad or problematic interactions between the police and the public, it erodes trust. It makes it that much more difficult for people to have faith in the police, to want to cooperate with the police, and making sure we still keep this academic. There's this thing called clearance rates, how we measure whether the police are solving the crimes that they know about. And when we talk about this clearance rate, to solve crimes, police sort of kind of need people to give them information, sort of kind of need people to cooperate with the police. And when someone is actually charged, courts need people to testify, whether it be in a grand jury or in the rare cases where someone comes to trial. Prosecutors and judges, our court system kind of sort of need folks to step forward and say, yes, that happened. And I'm willing to point out, yes, I saw them do it. I know they did it. But if people are unwilling or less willing to participate in our court processes because they have less faith in the system, and it starts with their interactions with the police, that doesn't leave us in a good place for dealing with crime. A couple of key terms I want to go over quickly. People oftentimes use interchangeably the terms discretion and disparity. We, including Dr. Brown, as a scholar and practitioner, I'm just standing on one square on the tile floor here. I am on my firmest footing, my best footing, when I talk just about disparities. It's easy to demonstrate, document disparities. You look at, hey, what's the population of a particular group or a classification of people? What's their number in the population? And then we look at what is their number in the system. And when their number in the system, by the system I mean arrest statistics, charging, convictions, incarceration rates, etc. When I look at that, the larger that number is relative to their presence in the population, the easier it is for me to note there is a disparity. We could talk some more about numbers, whether that disparity is of statistical significance. You got to do some math, carry the one, and show that, okay, this is not just a by chance disparity. This is a disparity that exists and it's statistically significant. That's actually not hard to do. Proving discrimination is very difficult. And I've had the good fortune today to be involved in two different radio shows. One, the Evan Bray show this morning, and then early in the afternoon, an interview with the CBC. And we talked about some of these issues. We're not dealing with, as I call it, my grandparents' racism. We are removed from a society where someone's calling me some of the worst words that you can ever call a naturally tan person such as myself. We're not in a place where there was a sign on the door saying people like me can't come in here. Dogs and people like me are not allowed. We're not there. We're farther away from those years. We're not in a place where someone's putting up physical barricades and saying, I have to go around the back to come in. That's changed. But just because we have written out of the books explicit racism, overt racism, explicit bias, as some people use that term, relative to implicit bias, just because we're no longer calling some people or being acceptable or as acceptable to call some people the vilest of things and to actively, openly, overtly be racist, or many of the isms, sexism, racism, classism, ageism. We've made the rule books pretty race neutral and ism-obia neutral. But that does not mean that these certain things are not happening. I'm going to jump ahead and say something now. I have a question for all in attendance. Can anyone tell me the day, the week, the month, the year? I'll make it the decade. Can you tell me that time when the magic pixie dust of equality, let's get rid of racism, and it's gone from everything? Can you tell me when it happened? Anybody? Okay, if we just limit it to policing, can anybody tell me when the magic pixie dust was spread around and policing became fair for all? Oh, come on. Nobody's gonna roll the dice and say, when community policing, or first, after the civil rights movement, when Martin Luther King was killed. No, nobody's picking that as the window of time when the pixie dust came out and everything was right? 2026. It's going to happen in 2026. That's it. That actually is the best answer I've received. When did race stop mattering? I mean, we've made some racial progress. As one of my professors who was trying to get me to go to law school pointed out, the only black I see is the black ink on white paper. And that black ink makes it clear that it is no longer acceptable to discriminate and to treat people negatively based on race. Okay, I'm tracking. You're right. Black ink, white pages. Gotcha. But we don't even have a time that we can talk about when racism disappeared. I oftentimes encounter in classes people say, well, community policing. The early 80s, when we changed the way we looked at policing. But community policing has not been a cure-all for a lot of things, and it surely has not fixed the influence of race in policing. If anything, community policing has empowered officers with more discretion. Community policing brought out a greater emphasis on disorder and paying attention to the little things. So you should stop someone and ask them where they're going, why are they here? Community policing actually was a steroid shot for officer discretion and a greater license for officers to pay attention to the little things. And when someone's race, particularly someone's race in a socially disorganized neighborhood, could be one of the little things, we actually ended up giving officers great license to do things that we didn't think about so much, like stop and frisk. So discrimination, it's hard to prove because our legal system, our courts, have made it a requirement that you must be able to somehow demonstrate intent. And the challenge is, I feel really good about y'all. Oh, that's when I'm a Southern boy and I say y'all, that means everybody. I feel really good about y'all. I have good eye contact and feeling. I have felt with some of the words that I've said today. I've connected with some of you. We're gonna have some good conversation over fruit and pop. But I can't actually read your minds. Well, I should say it in the mic. I can't actually read your minds. I don't have a computer or a floating orb that can tell me what you're thinking. I can't prove your intent when you ask me a question tonight. Just like I can't prove the intent of an officer and why they did what they did. I can infer a lot of things. I can look at a bunch of things and go, it's very plausible that this happened because of this. but I can't prove what's in your brain because I do not have the mind reading machine. And our legal system has focused on making it very difficult for us to prove discrimination. We do not have a truly racially neutral justice system because how people even enter the system is not racially neutral. We can create laws, we can create statutes that take race out and say, hey, everybody's going to be treated this way. So Robert Brown, what's happening to you is because of the laws and procedures that were set. And they would be the same for Amin Asfari if he were to be before us charged with the same offense and had the same criminal background, et cetera. So you're just being treated the same by the law. And we have to, if we're going to make any real progress, 2026, if we're going to make that progress, we have to start recognizing race neutrality in the law is limited. And when it comes to the academic research, we must stop hiding from mixed findings. For those of you who do not read research journals, let me tell you, one of the things that we have that happens is there are many scholars, particularly scholars who do not want to offend agencies that give them access and agencies they work with. They tend to do a lot of writing when it comes to the research, particularly research around race, saying, well, the findings are mixed or inconclusive. But their starting point is somehow at that magical pixie dust moment that's never happened. Academic research has moved from, oh, hey, qualitatively we're acknowledging race matters. But then when we started engaging in more rigorous statistical analysis, we started to see, well, after we control for a variety of factors, race is either not as significant or not significant in our statistical models. And then when you read the fine print, they talk about how their statistical models have limited predictive ability. We have people who hide around statistics and are unwilling to acknowledge our studies should be starting from the point of prove to me that race doesn't matter instead of prove to me that race does matter in this area. Unconscious bias, implicit bias, that's the term that we use a lot today. And this actually goes much deeper. I'm a criminal justice person, and at times I dislike acknowledging sociologists. If there are any sociologists in here, I'm going to say, y'all are right. Sociologists they've been right and they get it right more times than straight up criminal justice folks and criminologists. We somehow move away from the sociological tradition of what majority groups do to minority groups. Whether those minority groups are minority groups because of just simply counting numbers, or they're minority groups because they represent a racial or ethnic or tribal group that is not considered the dominant in the society. But those in the majority tend to do really messed up things to those in the minority. Kids, young people are the worst. People will squat up and do things to take advantage of those who are smaller, younger, not as skilled, do not have as many resources or as much in resources. So when you're talking about a system that represents the majority of society and controls society, it's not too surprising that whomever is considered to be the minority is not getting the same treatment as those in the majority, or are more likely to get less favorable treatment than those who are in the majority. And one of the things that has really come out in the policing research, for those who bother to read a little deeper, is that it's not simply about individual officers and their possible biases. Implicit bias training, if you've ever heard about it, if you maybe even have said, yeah, we need to do that. It's about getting individuals to recognize that while they might not be overt racist, explicit racist, that we all suffer from this thing known as implicit bias. We all have judgments, thoughts about certain people, certain configurations of people. I'm going to share with you one of my biases. I've gone through implicit bias training with a police department, and through the training, and implicit bias training is awesome when it comes to increasing awareness. I realized that I have a challenge working with adult women who are old enough to be my mother or aunt. And when that clicked for me, when I realized, oh my gosh, I do treat them differently. I'm apprehensive when I interact with older women, particularly as students coming into my space, that wow, I'm on guard. I have trust issues when the conversation starts going in a certain way. As soon as they throw out to me, you know I'm old enough to be. I know you know things, Dr. Brown, but I was there when that happened. That thing you're talking about, those slides you put up, I was there. So forget you and your fancy book knowledge and education. I found out that I'm biased. And I realized that I'm recorded. I actually downgraded a couple of people who fall into this category. I graded some of their exams, essay exams and papers a little harder. They triggered me. And here I am thinking I'm a respectful, good Southern boy who loves all my elders, especially anybody who could be my auntie or my mama. And it didn't matter. Oh, and if they were non-white, it was worse for me. And one of my curse moments, and that was some shit for me. To realize, here I am, champion of justice. Here I am talking about all this stuff. And I found out that certain gender, age, and race and ethnicity combinations, that's a trigger for me. And police officers find, hey, I'm not out there just hating on black folks. I interact well with black folks. I help Mrs. Johnson. I work with Mr. Jones. But young Bobby, I'm looking out for him. So implicit bias helps people recognize, help people become more aware that they are potentially influenced by factors that they've never thought about before, particularly how those factors interact with people. I am getting a sign that I'm going to shut down in a minute, so I'm going to go through a few things for everybody. I probably talked too long about my family, my background, and my life and such. But I'm going to make sure that we get through some of the key points here, and anything in this presentation you want, you will be able to email me or Professor Asfari, and you'll be able to get that. Fair deal? So we've recognized that officers can have biases, but we need to make sure that we recognize that citizens can have biases. And those biases can actually extend to place. Again, some strong sociologists, Professors Sampson and Professors Raudenbush, in the early 2000s, published some research that probably doesn't get enough recognition because it does not have the flashy title of implicit bias. It's not a model. They published a very powerful piece called Seeing Disorder. And what they found was the more a neighborhood is non-white, the blacker the neighborhood, the more people saw that neighborhood as being disordered. This finding held even for black residents in predominantly black neighborhoods. Isn't that something? If we view spaces as either being white spaces or black spaces, more criminogenic spaces versus more safe spaces, and if people inherently view areas that have more black people as somehow just being less safe, if that's a human condition for the people who live there, why would we expect officers to not be influenced by that? Why would we expect that not to be a factor in people pushing the button and why they call the police, what they call the police over? Why would we not expect that to influence how the police enter those neighborhoods in those situations? If I view a place as being more dangerous, I'm going to go in more guarded. And if I somehow view inherently anyone in that space, whether they are a resident or a visitor, as being more dangerous, well, I'm probably going to be more coercive in my actions. So citizen perceptions of place matter. And I think that what we need to acknowledge today is it's not simply racist cops who turned their Ku Klux Klan white hoods and gowns that they traded them in for blue uniforms with hats and badges. That's too simplistic. We need to recognize that police for a long time have existed to try to preserve place. And anyone and anything that is considered to be out of order for that place can be triggering for officers, can be something that make officers and police departments and their decisions on how they're going to deploy policing resources. We need to deploy more officers in these spaces because these spaces are more dangerous. Well, if that's the model you inherit, but you think you're being race neutral and you're not recognizing where the police are and how they're there, we're going to continue to have problems. Let's see. 5 minutes can I have? All right, I'm going to blaze through some of this. We can definitely bring this up in conversations, and again, the slides will be yours if you want them. So what we've seen, in I'd say the last decade, we've seen many of these things being the recommended magic bullet for how we're going to see better policing in general and to deal with race-related problems and issues in criminal justice and in policing. Increasing the number of white officers, increasing the number of non-white officers, increasing the number of black officers. It's one of the oldest suggestions, and the research does not support it. Black officers, and this is one of my direct areas of specialization, the perception or the belief that black officers are simply going to come in and they're going to be able to fix all the things that are going on policing is very short-sighted. There are issues with how black officers are accepted in the community. The concept of double marginality. Black officers are not accepted by their fellow police officers. They're not considered to be truly blue. And black officers are not completely accepted by the communities they come from because they're thought to be sellouts. So we have issues with double marginality and how that might influence officer behavior. Black officers are different. And when we go back to it depends on the outcome or the issue we're looking at, we do see variation between black and white officers. Black officers are well known for being pro-community policing, pro-community-based initiatives compared to their white counterparts. So if you are trying to address a racial issue in policing and it's about attitudes toward being more community-focused, black officers are a good go-to relative to white officers. They embrace community policing and community activities differently. And here's something that's also really important. What do we do when police officers tell you that there's racial bias in policing? It's one thing when citizens say, oh, the cops stop us all the time. They racially profile us. Oh, the cops are really heavy-handed. They treat us differently. They beat us down. What do we do when people who are police officers tell us similar stories? They're not just disgruntled community members. And unfortunately, the data shows that black officers, when they're surveyed, they report that racism, they see minority citizens and poor citizens being treated differently on the streets by their fellow officers. And they too, at times, are treated differently, especially if they're not recognized as a police officer. So what do we do about that? Black officers are more likely or as likely to use force as white officers. And there's been some research that has found that black officers are up to 9 times as likely to arrest black citizens compared to white officers. That's a problem for us. And just simply putting in black officers is problematic. Body-worn cameras have been thought to be one of the latest, greatest innovations. Hey, if there's a camera going on and I'm watched, I won't do bad things. But there are several issues with body-worn cameras that we need to keep in mind. There are inconsistencies in how body-worn cameras are used, are available in departments, how they're used in departments. There's not a lot of evidence that they change use of force behaviors. There's some evidence, a couple of recent studies, like in the last year, that have found that body-worn cameras increase perceptions of procedural justice. But We still have only a little bit of research on how body-worn cameras potentially change officer behavior. There are issues on whether officers are turning their cameras on or keeping them on when they're supposed to be on. There are resource limitations when it comes to body-worn cameras. Great idea, but if any of you who tried to live off of one thumb drive or a computer with not a lot of memory, you know that it would take a lot to keep a bunch of videos on your system. It's expensive to keep all of those videos, and there are some agencies that have, we keep a video of Officer Brown's shift, we keep it for 2 weeks. Sucks to be you if in 15 days you come forward with a complaint saying, Officer Brown mistreated me. Oh, well, our system already purged that video. Those are some of the real challenges we have. And police departments have not been always comfortable with releasing footage, particularly to the public. Police departments are concerned about what people would see and litigation. De-escalation training, not everybody buys into it within law enforcement agencies. Some officers report that it's some touchy feel-good stuff, and I'm not here to de-escalate things. If somebody escalates me, they F around and they find out. Give me, front row, give me something. People mess around, and there's some officers who believe in a coercive approach, and they don't feel that it's their responsibility to back down or cool the situation. They're going to cool the situation by putting somebody down. So we have that issue with people believing that it works. Conceptually, it makes a lot of sense, but we still don't have a great deal of evidence that it changes officer behavior. And there are issues with it being a tactic, like verbal judo, teaching people to just talk people down, versus it being, hey, your orientation. Hey, let's talk. Hey, I want to enter this situation and I'm de-escalating. I'm not escalating the situation. I don't want it to become a situation that needs to be de-escalated. We still have this issue of whether it's a tactic versus are we truly getting officers who believe in it. Implicit bias training, great for awareness, little evidence that it changes behavior in the long term. Part of that reason for a little evidence, implicit bias training, which has also become an industry. Implicit bias training, someone comes in, someone like me actually, comes in, does a day of training, and I leave. And you all as officers or an agency, you are supposed to figure out how you deal with being triggered by women who are older than you and could be your family member. You got to figure that out, Robert. We're not here for that. We just did our job in making you aware that, hey, you have some biases when it comes to this. So, and the training is also not reinforced, and that is considered to be a big reason why we're not seeing it last in behavior. If it's just a one-shot training that increases awareness and you do not put in the time to focus on how do I deal with the biases that I'm aware of, then we shouldn't be surprised that it's not making things work. Early intervention systems, basically coming up with ways to get alerted to Officer Brown, who might be a problem early in his career. These early intervention systems, they make a lot of sense if you can identify officers who may need remediation, who may need more training, or who are just unfit for the job. Let's invest in those systems. Well, those systems are problematic because they require a lot of money. One of the things that's important about policing as a job, officers have rights as employees, and they don't like systems that track their behaviors. Civilian oversight, hopefully you all know this one. They are not very powerful because they're not very empowered. When at best you have the ability to make a recommendation about what should happen with Officer Brown, yet as a citizen group you have no teeth in making something happen to Officer Brown. You're just a recommending body. The big splash, what do? We need to be very thoughtful and we need to be very honest with using data and theory to guide behavior. There's knowledge out there on what we can do. And particularly police practitioners, agencies, governments, they can be guided to what to do. There are community members that know some of the right things to do. There are academics who know it, but we have to get practitioners and we have to get government to embrace using data and using theory appropriately to guide behaviors. It's more than a black-white thing. One of the terrible things that we do, even for those of us who collect data, we have a long history of simplifying data points into black-white data points. We are doing a better job of recognizing ethnicity and nationality, but most of our research is you're either white or non-white, and non-white, a lot of times it's just recorded you're either black or white. So we need to do research that goes beyond this black-white thing so that we're appropriately capturing how this matters. Be wise in who gets hired and how they are deployed, and do not hire, and please, please, please demand that we unemploy people who engage in racially biased behavior. Unemploy, fire them, terminate them, get rid of them. We need to have a form of government and society that does not tolerate people behaving in racially biased ways when these people have the ability to take away someone's life, to take away someone's liberty. Build and utilize practitioner and research partnerships. Learn and collaborate. In our intermission, I can talk to you about some of the work that I've done directly with police agencies and courts, lending my expertise as Dr. Brown, and I've seen many people lend their expertise as community members for the second bullet point, so that the system can hear the voices, learn from people, and provide better justice, better services. But it's a two-way thing. The partnership has to be a genuine partnership. The partnership needs to be one where both parties listen to each other, try to enact something that is collaborative. Hopefully, both parties are bringing something to the table, but sometimes one party is going to bring more to the table than another. And we need to get over that being what do I get out of this collaboration? And then a last bullet point, we'll take a break and come back. We need to engage media outlets to promote responsible, the key word, responsible justice system information. We need to do our part to shut down propaganda. We need to do our part to shut down people being able to put out information and portray the justice system and justice processes in ways that don't reflect reality. And it sometimes intentionally or clearly exacerbate problems and issues. Do not just put out the statistics and leave people to think, this group must be more dangerous or criminogenic because look at how many of them are in prison. Have information put out there that shows people, okay, there's more to this. Do not allow people to simplify things because we want 30-second sound bites. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for giving me extra time. I'm here and I'm looking forward to our conversation after you all are able to get some refreshments.